Thank you. I'd like to recognize Mr. Larson for 5 minutes.
Dr. Dillingham, what would you see as a key contributing factor to the growth in the total and the per passenger EAS subsidies as a result of your report?
Mr. Larson, I think that the fact that there are the increased number of communities that are a part of EAS, that certainly is a major factor. The other factor is something that the other panelists mentioned in terms of the price of fuel has quadrupled over the last several years, which also contributes to the subsidy cost as well. So those two factors are the key factors that contribute to the increase in cost.
Would the fuel be more of a contributor to the per passenger than the
yes,
per
sir.
passenger ES subsidy? Yeah. Okay. Sure. Secretary Carlin.
Thank you, Congressman. Two other factors that I would like to mention is that what we have seen in the past few years, a number of EAS carriers have gone out of business. So the pool has become smaller in terms of the available carriers. We're also seeing a lot of the equipment, the 19 to 34 seat aircraft, which have been essentially the right-sized aircraft for these communities, aging and being retired. And so finding the types of aircraft that are going to work has posed challenges as well and additional expense.
So on that point, what's the challenge in finding the right size aircraft at this point?
Well, they're not. The manufacturers are not making the 19 to 34 seaters. So what we're seeing, and Congress did change some of the requirements to allow 9 seaters, and we're seeing in many of the communities with the shorter haul flights, the 9 seaters are working well. In other larger communities, the 50 seat RJs are working, but they are more expensive to run as well. So we don't necessarily have the sweet spot at this point for the type of aircraft.
All right. So I have one more question for Secretary Kurland. It's issues brought up earlier, but and unrelated to the rural service, but has to do with the NAI application. Can you tell the subcommittee where DOT is in the process on the NAI application?
Congressman, as you know, it's a contested proceeding, and so I'm not at liberty to comment on it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. I have a couple more questions for the panel that I wasn't able to get to during my time period, and I'd like to start with Secretary Kurland. I will remind you, I do not have any other committee action going on that I'm going to ask you about today like last time. So I just want to actually get your opinion. I mentioned in the SCA SDP program, we had a little somewhat of a discussion earlier during my questioning. I appreciated your responses, but Secretary Kurland, can you tell me how important is community involvement for this program, and can you give me some ideas of how airports can effectively work with IDOT or work with USDOT even more so to make it easier for you to make a determination?
Thank you, Congressman, and I appreciate your comments. The SCASDAP program, and as both of our airport managers have mentioned, and I compliment them on the great work they've done at their airports, have mentioned the importance of community involvement. And we have seen that many of the successful programs have had community involvement. We view that as a very high priority where the communities are putting skin in the game, because that means that they're going to support the service. If it's a revenue guarantee, they're going to use the service. So that type of support is critical. One of the other things that we have learned from some of the other reports and that the GAO, the IG has done, and that we've taken a look at ourselves, is the importance before, for example, we issue a revenue guarantee, that a feasibility study is done, so that the airport, as much as possible, sets themselves up for success. And so we think that those types of things are important. We've also recently, in our recent RFPs, put in an opportunity for intermodal funding to the extent that a community was interested in looking at that as well. So But I would like to commend Congress in taking in the funding of the SCASDAP program and viewing it as a laboratory, as giving these communities, these airports, an opportunity to try new and different things. But community support is really critical.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Dillingham, do you have anything to add?
Yes, just a footnote to that is that DOT is maintaining a database of sort of lessons learned from the small community program, which has benefited communities that are thinking about these innovative approaches, what works, why it works, and what they need to do to be more successful. So we think that's a good thing for improving the effectiveness of the small community program.
Great. Does anybody else on the panel have any other comments they'd like to make on the small community program?
Well, just from my own experience, Congressman Davis, community involvement's essential, and communities should have skin in the game, economic skin in the game, in order to make sure that they're doing everything that they can to support unique air carrier services. I agree with everything that Secretary Kurland said with the challenges of finding the right aircraft. I think you referred to it as the sweet spot, something that, frankly, passengers want cabin class service, and like it or not, there is a certain turboprop avoidance factor. But the one thing that hasn't been mentioned here today that I think I should at least put on the table is just airport crowding in general. What these services need is connectivity to the nation's transportation network. There's rarely enough traffic, from small town community to small town community. So being able to make connections in large hubs is essential for the service to be successful, which means small communities need to partner with major airlines. The pushback you get is a small airplane consumes the same amount of airspace as a wide body. So, you were competing for scarce resources in places like Atlanta and Chicago and New York and Philadelphia, San Francisco, LA, and that's a huge problem, I think, one of many that face the retention of these vital air links in smaller communities.
Right. Well, the hearing's about to end. Does anybody on the panel have any issues you'd like to discuss that we might not have gotten to? Now's your time to go ahead and do that.
Did I mention
Going
the
once?
pilot shortage?
Going once, going twice. If there are no further questions, I thank the witnesses for their testimony and the members for their participation. The subcommittee stands adjourned.